Today we're going to be talking about basic storytelling. And though I say basic storytelling, we'll probably get pretty in-depth into some of this, but what we're looking at is the basic story theory and basic story structure. As a budding videographer, I was consumed with all of the readily available information on the internet, but a lot of it focuses on the technical aspects of the work and not so much the craft aspects of the work. Because of that, I'm very passionate about talking about storytelling and making sure that we can break a story down into its fundamental components so that way it helps us in our day-to-day work and we can become faster about it. There's nothing worse than having 8 interviews that you have to watch through and then trying to create a video from that and not knowing where to start. We're just going to focus on a testimonial promo video where you're gathering a bunch of interviews and you're trying to put them all together. We're gonna use that as our basic example as I dive into this so you can see how storytelling is a foundational component of creating that type of a video product. What's frustrating to me when you start talking to people about story structure and trying to break down and define what a story is, people will say that a story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Anything that is time-bound has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It starts, it runs, it stops. But those words are meaningless and empty, and they don't reveal anything about the nature or character of a story, and they don't help us in trying to create one. So at its core, a story is a character who wants something and faces a series of obstacles in order to get it. Let's look at that sentence and go ahead and just break that off into its individual components so we can see, because there's a lot in that sentence. You have a character who wants something. So there's a character without who wants, and they face a series of obstacles, conflict, and there's a series of problems that unfold over time in order to get it. And so then we know at the end, they're either going to get it or they're not going to get it. Most often, if we're in the marketing storytelling sphere here, they're getting what they want because that is positive marketing, unless you're making like a political bash commercial or something, which politics. We know inherently that a story is a little bit more than that. Somebody can tell you a story and then by the time they finish it, you're like mad. And this is what I call the cool story bro moment. It's a situation wherein somebody just told you an absolutely terrible story and wasted your time. That example, and we've all have experienced that, reveals a interesting characteristic of what a story actually is. So a story makes a promise to the audience. And our expectation as the audience now is that that story will take us on a journey that makes good on its initial promise. So now we're starting to understand that the beginning, the middle, and the end should do something. You make the promise, you take them on a journey, and you make good on your promise at the end. And in your basic 3-act structure, you have a beginning hook, a middle build, and an ending payoff. So your beginning hook, your first act, okay, should take up about 25% of the time of the story. This is the 25, 50, 25 percentage breakdown, okay? Act 1, 25%. Act 2, 50%. Act 3, 25%. But what does it mean simply by saying the beginning hook, the middle build, and the ending payoff? Well, let's look really quickly at Freytag's pyramid to help us get more of a sense on what ought to happen at each of these stages. Freytag's pyramid, the exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and denouement. 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 Some weird French word. The exposition is where you're introducing the character and giving them a sense of what this world is like. Between the exposition and the rising action, you have your inciting incident. And this is the moment of no turning back, right? This is the point of no return. It's when the actual conflict of the story begins. Rising action is the series of conflict and as it progressively complicates towards the climax. The climax is the event wherein the character becomes who they need to be to ultimately face their opponent. The falling action is when the story continues to build into that final fight where the conflict is ultimately resolved at the point of resolution, which is the final kind of like end moment when the hero is either victorious or not victorious. And then you have the denouement, which is the sort of like tying up of each of these plot threads and the resolving of the complete story. So that's Freytag's pyramid, which is a sort of basic level understanding of structuring and plotting out your story. How do we apply that to a corporate storytelling story, right? How do we incorporate this into our own storytelling? So we're just going to stick with 5 steps. I feel like 5 is a good solid round number. I got 5 fingers on my hand. I can do this as I go through the steps. Step 1, status quo. Step 2, the problem. Step 3, the solution removes the problem. Step 4, the solution elevates above the problem. And step 5, the lasting impression. The status quo, you introduce the characters, and this is where you make the promise to the audience. You're setting their expectations. You're showing them the industry that they're within. You're showing them the setting. You're showing them the characters. This might be a good time to express that character's desire. Then we go to point 2, which is the problem. Now, the problem is the problem that the character is facing. I challenge you to really dig deep into the problem. Don't just mention the problem at the surface level. Show how this problem affects your characters on an emotional basis. This is where you are raising the stakes. Number 3 is you introduce the solution, right? And you show clearly how the solution removes the problem. Then step 4 is you actually show how the solution elevates our characters above the problem. You want a solution that is actually better than its competitors. So here you're going to talk about the features, the functionality, how it differentiates itself, and basically show how life is significantly better with this solution. I mean, the problem's gone, but dang, look at all this other stuff we have, which is really awesome. And then 5 is the lasting impression. The lasting impression, your characters are now basically communicating their philosophical end statement. It's like how the future will be so bright now because we have this thing. How I am transformed now because I have this thing in my life. That's about it. That's the 5-step framework. You've got the status quo, the problem, the solution removes the problem, the solution elevates above the problem, and the lasting impression. I challenge you to search back through your own videos and see if you can find this formula inside of them, and then start using this as a sort of step to get past the hurdles a bit more easily as you're sitting down to actually create your narrative. Now, I'm not saying that your narrative has to follow this structure. I'm not even saying that all of my videos that I make follow this structure. But this is usually what my first draft will follow before I start elevating it up and complicating the narrative a little bit and making it a little bit more exciting. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this video was helpful to you. If it was, share it with some of your friends, click that like button, and click the subscribe button to stay up to date with more videos on storytelling, craft, process, and strategy.